Welcome back to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Last time, we went through Ganon's castle, dispelling the 6 barriers surrounding the central tower, and now we're gonna climb up. You might notice that my outfit is a little bit different. I decided to change it for the sake of the iconicism, you know? There's gonna be a lot of fighting, and these trials aren't really all that hard. We've gone through worse, and we're at max health, plus we have the defense buff, so it's not that difficult. The Dynalphos we faced in the Gerudo training ground, and if you spam the quick spin, they're pretty easy to take down. Lots of the tower is gonna be a lot of this, climbing up a bit of it after defeating a couple of enemies in a room. After defeating those enemies, the door unlocks, and in this room we have Stalfos. We've fought a ton of these before, and the same strategy with the Bogoron sword remains. If you do some stabs, you're pretty low profile, so you'll be able to get through them. And in this room, one doesn't respawn if you take long beating the other, so you can take your time beating them if you so desire. But since I have so many hearts and so much defense, I decided it's best to charge my way through. And you actually get a boss key in this dungeon. Pretty interesting. I don't think a lot of further Zelda games have boss keys to beat their dungeons. Usually, final dungeons, I mean. Usually it's like a bunch of refights and bosses and stuff. But in this case, we have 2 Iron Knuckles. The good thing is, one of them will be attacking you at a time, if you only attack one of them. If you decide to attack the second one, then the second one will obviously come after you, but if you focus down one, even if there's 2 in front of you, it won't be that difficult. Because, well, the first one isn't going to have its, or the second one isn't going to have its armor broken, so it won't be fast enough to keep up with you anyway. And that was actually the last pair of enemies that we had to fight before getting up to Ganondorf himself. There's just some more stairs that we have to go up. And this room that requires the boss key isn't actually the boss. There's a bunch of pots though, where you can refill some of your supplies. You're going to be needing arrows and magic for this fight. The fight against Ganondorf, obviously. And I think if you listen to the music, as you go up this Mario 64-esque endless staircase, you can hear that Ganon's theme is kind of playing as you continue to climb up. I switched out for the Master Sword in this fight. You can fight him with the Bogoron sword, but I feel like the Master Sword might do more damage against him. And it's also a fitting thing, you know. The Master Sword is the thing that repels all evil, and Ganondorf is the incarnation of evil or something like that. So, you know, using the Master Sword against him is the proper way to do things, really. And the music is actually coming from Ganondorf himself. He's playing this organ. I think it might be an organ. I'm not sure if it's a piano or not. And now, the Triforce is appearing on the backs of all our hands. You don't actually need to restock on health when you come into this room, because it's automatically filled as soon as you enter. You know, just to make sure that you're topped off for the final battle. And Ganondorf's cape is really badly rendered, I guess. The way he moves up and down, the cape kind of goes down on the right first and then the left, kind of like it's making a wave formation. But he's, you know, panting up and down at the same rate on both sides, so it shouldn't really do that, but whatever. And now he reveals to us that all this time he had the Triforce of Power. Whoop-de-doo. Not that big of a deal, we already knew. But apparently, it enables him to make waves of darkness that force us back. And Navi is saying here that she can't get close. You might think that that's not too big of a deal, but Navi not being able to get close means that we can't Z-target or L-target Ganondorf here. It isn't that big of a deal though, because we're going to be playing some Dead Man's Volley. Basically the same thing that we were doing in the Forest Temple boss, trying to reflect his light balls back at him. Of course, the bottle is still the best item to do this with, because well, the bottle's animation is so long, and there's so many, I guess, active frames on it, that you can be pretty lax with reflecting these, whereas if you use the Master Sword, it takes it a little while. And after you reflect it back to him, he gets stunned a bit, and you have to shoot him with the light arrow, but I missed. So we have to go through the whole tennis match again. It's actually not that difficult of a fight. Though, if the ball does hit you, I think it'll do a decent chunk of damage, especially if you're not, if you don't have the double defense. You're probably gonna take like 3 hearts or so. Light arrows are pretty costly, so if you do need to restock on arrows or magic, you can jump down the hole and go back to the room with the pots and stuff in it, and you'll be able to refill on your stuff. After stunning him with the light arrows, you can go up to him and basically slash away at him. He's not really gonna do anything. I'm not sure if it's just the bottle, but I feel like when you use the bottle, it takes a lot longer than if you use the Master Sword or the Big Oron Sword. But I don't know. I honestly haven't used the Master Sword or the Big Oron Sword to reflect the light balls in a long time, so I can't really tell. And he does have more moves than this. If you try to get close to him without having stunned him with the light arrows yet, he'll do a ground pound. He actually did one at the very beginning of the fight. And when he does that, he breaks away some of the square blocks around, and eventually can get to the point where the only blocks left are the 4 in the corners. He doesn't break them all at once. It's more like he gradually does so if you try to stay close to him. But if you dash away as he's getting up, then he's really not going to do the attack, so it doesn't matter. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, this fight is pretty boring looking, and that is completely the truth. It is very boring. You need to have a lot of patience, and it taking a long time doesn't lend well to me doing commentary over it. It's probably the worst of the Ganondorf fights we've had in the Zelda series. Like, Twilight Princess was definitely a ton better. One thing you can do if you're not confident in your jumps is use the hover boots to get across the gap. If you do that, you'll pretty much make it every time. Sometimes if you try to jump to one of the corner spots, you might not make the jump, and if some of the blocks near the corner spots are far away, you won't be able to get to them. When he's charging up a big attack, you can shoot him with a light arrow mid-charge, and it'll basically stun him just like if you shot him when he gets hit by one of his own balls. Also, if he does fully charge it, he will send out 5 energy spheres at you. What you can do if that happens is you can charge up a spin attack, and you can actually hit all 5 spheres at once, and then they'll head toward him and actually stun him. So it's pretty interesting near the end. I didn't get to show that last part off. I did in a different recording, but that wasn't this one. Overall, not really a tough boss fight, and Ganondorf is pretty much done. In that last scene, he spat up something green after you dealt the final blow to him. I think in the original, like, non-censored version where the shield had the Islamic symbol and there was chanting in the fire temple and such, the mirror shield, I mean, he spat up blood, like it was clearly blood and it was red and stuff. I guess that was a little too graphic for the kiddies. And apparently he decided with this last exhale that he's going to crumble the castle. Very Metroid-y, actually, where you have to leave the planet or castle before time runs out. So now we have a time limit to escape, and the path we take to escape isn't all that different from the path that we took to get here. We're actually going to be seeing a lot of the same rooms. This time, though, we have Zelda on our side, and her super magical power is that she can unlock gates for us. It's actually not all that special, but when you get up to a gate and you're next to Zelda, she'll raise her arms and some light will shine and bam, the gate's gone. I like to switch to the Big Oron Sword again at this point because there's going to be some enemies that we have to fight, and the big Oron sword just does more damage to regular enemies, so I'm gonna be equipping it for this final escape sequence. There's some parts with gaps. If you do fall down, you will take falling damage. And Zelda just kind of walks over them as if she has hover boots on or something. Touching the stationary fire rocks or getting hit by any of the boulders falling from the ceiling will do damage to you. And that's actually the worst thing that can happen to you here, because if you take damage, then Zelda will kind of stop for a little bit and she'll gasp as she did there when you jump off the edge. But I landed back. She usually does that if you're gonna fall like guaranteed into a pit, but she didn't here. If you take damage, Zelda will gasp and she'll kind of stay there for a bit, and you can actually run past her for quite a distance as she's staying still and gasping, which is a bad thing because if she gets too far away from you, she actually won't move at all. These Stalfos here are going by far simple logic, where if you defeat one without defeating the other in the allotted amount of time, the other will revive. Thanks to the big Oron sword, it's easy to kill them, so it doesn't really matter. And Zelda will drop hearts for you. If you're full on hearts, she'll actually drop rupees, which I guess that's a problem with the programming, because usually pots that drop hearts or other items, if you're full on them, they'll drop rupees instead. So maybe it's like a bug or something, I don't know. That was the only room that enemies get thrown at us in. For the rest of the dungeon, the only problem is going to be these falling boulders, which don't actually do that much damage. They did a quarter of a heart just there. And this room right here doesn't have like a transition. That's kind of weird in my opinion. And as you can see, I'm running away from Zelda, and she's actually following me here, but in a past take, she kind of stood there, as I said before, and I got to the bottom of the stairs and I was like, where's Zelda? And I wasted a good 5 seconds that I totally had, because we're leaving here with a minute 24 still on the clock. But I had to like go back and grab her and then come back here. And now we're going to this final stretch. There was a re-dead there, which will stall you for a bit, but it's not that big of a deal. And if you hug the right wall, it's not even going to be able to see you, so it doesn't really matter. You could play the Sun Song, I guess, and it definitely won't see you, but that takes a bit of time, even though it doesn't take away from the time limit, because when you play the Ocarina, all time stops, kinda. But now we get to watch the tower crumble in such 64-bit glory. It doesn't actually look all that good in this version or in the 3DS version. I don't think it makes it look much better. I guess I could take this time as the tower is crumbling for a really long time to talk about a glitch in this game. You can end up in Ganon's tower as young Link by doing something that I can't really do, nor have I really tried to do it. I probably could if I put my mind to it, but I don't know. I don't want to glitch the game, I guess. I mean, I have before, but it's a bit too much of a skip for me, I guess. You basically go from the Kokiri Forest to Ganon's tower, and I think you end up right after you beat Ganon, or Ganondorf, rather. So you don't need the light arrows or anything like that. You can beat the game as young Link. And in these cutscenes, he kind of floats in the air so that he could look as tall as the adult Link. It's actually pretty funny in my opinion, but it's not over yet. There's one more thing that we have to do. As you can see, there's this big bunch of rubble in a pile over here. And if you get close to it, it seems that Ganondorf isn't actually dead yet. He's still alive, although lacking in a cape. His hair is still beautifully flowing though. And he decides to use his Triforce of Power to become Ganon for the first time. Very interesting. The timeline kinda makes it so this is the first time Ganondorf ever turns into Ganon, and then every time after this it's just Ganon. Like there's no human form or anything like that. Ganondorf is the name of the human form, I believe, and Ganon is this beastly pig form. and he knocked away our Master Sword, which we need to beat the boss. So we're gonna have to get that back somehow. This fight is pretty intimidating. It's probably one of my top like atmospheric bosses. Like Ganondorf comes up from the rubble and becomes this giant pig thing that you can't even really see. He's very like blacked out, I guess. You can kind of see him when the lightning strikes, but for the most part things are pretty dark. In the 3DS version things get a bit brighter, so you can see him a bit better. But I feel like that takes away from a lot of that atmosphere. And in this version you can see him a bit too, but I don't know. I think in the 3DS version that kind of like fails a bit when it comes to the final boss fight. As for strategies for taking him down, you can either roll under his legs to try and hit his tail, or you can shoot a light arrow in his face, and that'll stun him for a bit so you can get around him and then do an attack on his tail. The problem is, all of the weapons that we have right now, they can't really do major damage to Ganondorf. It can only really stun him for a bit. We can't outright kill him at this point. And his sword swipes do a lot of damage. They do 2 hearts of damage with the double defense, so 4 hearts as much as an iron knuckle if you don't have that double defense. And when you stun him, you're able to grab the Master Sword, and it auto-equips it for you, which is a pretty nice thing to do. And now we can actually start attacking the boss for realsies. Doing jump attacks is pretty useful. I think the Master Sword is the only thing that doesn't do 1 damage against him, like as much as the Kokiri Sword. So jump attacks are the way to go because it'll do like 4 as compared to the 1 that everything else does. You could do regular like slashes if you roll under him, that is. I prefer to do that because, well, you don't really have time to set up for a jump attack. And the stunning still works if you shoot him with the light arrows. The first time I actually did this boss, I don't think I ever used the light arrows. I just rolled under him and kept attacking his tail. Navi can lock onto him in this fight, unlike in the previous one. In the previous one, you actually could lock on for a brief amount of time. After you stunned him and started attacking him with the sword, you could lock on and get some Navi text for him. But by that point, you've already stunned him and you know how to beat him, so it's pretty useless. For this one, I guess, if you don't get the idea to use the light arrows, which I didn't originally, you can talk to her and she'll be like, oh, use the light arrows on his face or something like that. But you don't really need it, and now we can deal the final blow to Ganon. Zelda actually helps out here. After stunning him for that last time with the Master Sword, Zelda will decide to use her magic to keep him steady as you deal the final blow to him. The final blow kind of looks like the combo that Link uses in Smash, where he does a couple slashes and then a stab. Maybe not, that might be stretching a bit. But now the sages will use their sagey power, and instead of killing Ganondorf, they seal him, which is pretty odd. Like, you don't think he's not gonna break out of the seal later, which he does because there are other Zelda games that have Ganondorf in it that are, you know, past this in the timeline, although I'm not sure if the timeline was really a thing back then. I guess generally people did know that this was the first game. After all, this is the first game where Ganon is Ganondorf, where he has his human form and then he turns into the giant pig thing. In the other games, he was just a giant pig. Ganon. This final scene of Ganon's, or Ganondorf's now, because he's back to a human. The final scene is kind of lame, because he's cursing you in all caps. He's saying, curse you, Link, curse you, Zelda, curse you, sages, and stuff, but when he says Link, it's in lowercase if you put your name lowercase. Like, if you named yourself Link in all caps, it makes a bit more sense, I guess. But since I named him properly, it looks a bit bad. Although he does transition into using proper capitalization and such after this whole curse you thing. So I guess they thought that would be a nice transition if you didn't all caps your name. Oh, look at this. Now we're in the final boss fight area of Skyward Sword. We're actually not. This scene kind of starts up the timeline stuff. I mean, it didn't originally, but with the Hyrule Historia and all that, now we have timeline stuff, and this is the game that kind of split the timeline. Because what Zelda is saying here is that she wants us to become a child again. She wants us to live the life that we couldn't because we skipped ahead in time 7 years and thus kind of erased our childhood. So she decides to take the Ocarina of Time and send us back in time. Also, put the Master Sword back so that, the time won't be connected anymore. We can't go from past to present or past to future. And that's kind of where the timeline splits. There's the adult timeline, which has a few games, kind of the Toon Link games, which is pretty weird. You think the adult timeline would have the more dark games, but instead the child timeline does, where there's Majora's Mask, the sequel to this game, and Twilight Princess, the kind of edgy Legend of Zelda. And also like Four Swords Adventures, which is nothing to write home about, honestly. And then we have a third split in the timeline, which isn't featured in the game. It's a timeline where Link dies. Apparently, on his quest, somehow he couldn't save the world, and he failed. Although, it doesn't really say that Link dies, it just says that he failed. And in that timeline, we get pretty much the 2D games, like A Link to the Past, Zelda 1 and 2, the Oracle games, stuff like that. And then there's another set of games that's before the timeline splits, that is like Skyward Sword and Minish Cap and stuff. With Zelda playing Zelda's Lullaby rather than the Song of Time, which would make more sense for sending someone back through time, we get the credits. And I'm going to take this time to talk about this Let's Play, pretty much. I'm not going to use my opinions of the game, or talk about my opinions of the game, rather, because I've been pretty much talking about the game for a few hours, like 12 now, maybe even more. So I'm just going to talk about what I thought of my performance in this Let's Play, I suppose. And it's mostly going to be me kind of apologizing. I cheated, I guess you could call it. The way I did things, and I'm actually not going to do this here for this last stretch because I need the practice, I basically would talk about something, like talk about a topic for a little while, and maybe I'd screw up halfway through and keep talking, or maybe I'd just be done with the topic and there'd be a lot of empty space. So what I'd do is I'd stop the recording, I'd go back a bit, start talking again on a different topic or continuing with whatever topic I was before I messed up, and then keep going from there. It was a very stop and go method, and I thought it was the way to get the best parts out of this Let's Play, because it basically meant that I had no dead space, and that I kind of kept things going, Also, that I would be talking throughout the whole thing. That's pretty much the same thing. I just said that 3 times. Jeez, this is why I can't do it, like, all at once. Because I'd start talking about something and I'd be all tangential, or I'd just repeat the same thing over and over again, and this would be the result of it. I'd pretty much get nowhere in whatever conversation I was talking about. Not really conversation, topic. I'd also correct myself a lot like that, which I kind of did a couple times in the Let's Play, but I kind of cut those out. And when it came to recording, it felt fine. Like, I didn't really have a problem with it, because, well, it made the parts the best that they could be, in my opinion. There was nothing objectively wrong about them, I guess. But it kind of made me feel like I was not telling the truth, I suppose. Like that I made myself look like a good Let's Player, even though I really wasn't. For the first part, I kind of did the whole part at once. I might have done like one retake. I mean, I did a bunch of retakes, but I mean, within the same part, I might have split it into like 2 sessions of voice. Like at the beginning, I had a little bit, and then at the end, I did a ton of talking. But I don't know. For the rest of the Let's Play, it was all sectioned off talking. And I want to do a live Let's Play next. I want to do one where I can talk and keep on talking and also focus on the gameplay. But I don't think that I can do that, honestly. Not at this point. So I'm gonna make my next one another post-commentary one, which may or may not be a good thing, depending on your preference. But I feel like I kind of have to. I need the practice, honestly. And I need to start, you know... this is the problem. I was gonna say I need to start doing better, but that's basically what practice is. I just keep going on about random stuff. Well, not random stuff, and then I keep correcting myself. I just keep talking, and I keep repeating myself, which is not a good thing. I don't know. The end of this part is probably gonna sound pretty bad to the people watching, but I kind of don't mind that. I want people to see or hear what I actually talk like, you know? Not all perfect as I like to see it. I didn't think it was exactly perfect, but I don't want it to be what it isn't, you know? I want it to be me just constantly talking, being able to keep on with a topic without having to pause and think and then keep talking. I want to be able to talk and think on the fly, you know? And then eventually I want to be able to talk and think on the fly while playing a game. Luckily for me, I probably have a lot of time to do that anyway, because I'm going to be Let's Playing some more games for quite a while. I don't think I'm going to stop. I actually had a lot of fun doing this. Recording the game and then talking over it wasn't that bad of an experience, but I feel like doing it all at once will make a better experience for me, and probably for the people watching, because they get to see my reactions to the gameplay, you know, in real time. Navi kind of left us. She went into that window up there. And she didn't really have a reason to leave us. I mean, our adventure is over, yeah, but she could still hang out with us. And she's probably gotten attached to Link. After all, they spent 7 years together. Or in this case, 25 parts. But now we get to this final scene where Zelda is waiting at her window and not expecting someone to come by. But here's Link. And he's wearing the Hylian shield, which he honestly shouldn't have. But if you look at his hand, he has the Triforce of Courage still with him, which is very interesting. He went back in time and he like kept it. And I guess that means that Ganondorf and Zelda kept theirs too. It's weird. But I want to thank anyone who watched this for watching. If you left a comment, if you left a like, I really appreciated that. Like, comments bring so much smiles to my face. And I'll see you for whatever I Let's Play next.